if you've been watching this channel for a while, then you'll know that a certain presenter of ours, who shall remain nameless, is a huge fan of platinum trophies, having amassed well over 200, and that's just at the time of writing. By the time this video goes out, they'll probably be well on their way to 300. An inspiration to us all, honestly. For some games, getting to 100% completion is a walk in the park. You play through the story a couple of times, find a few collectibles, and Bob's your uncle. Some games, on the other hand, make it as difficult as humanly possible, often demanding ridiculous feats from their completionist players. For this list, we've trawled through our favourite titles and picked out some that are almost impossible to fully complete. Of course, there are some mad lads, lasses, or others out there that have been able to obtain every single achievement that these games have to offer. But us mere mortals have little to no chance of finishing them in their entirety. I'm Ashton from Triple Jump, and here are 10 nightmare games to 100% complete. Number 10, Dead Rising. Although it may not be the best game ever made, it's undeniable that Dead Rising can be lots of fun. After all, what's more entertaining than running around and bludgeoning zombies with items you can find in a mall? Don't answer that, it's rhetorical. If you're on an achievement hunt though, things can become very unentertaining quite quickly, especially if the only thing standing between you and completion is the 7-day Survivor trophy. In order to get your hands on it, you'll have to plop yourself into Infinity mode and stay alive for an in-game week. The passage of 7 days takes around 14 hours of real time. And you've also got to contend with the fact that Infinity mode sees Frank's health draining every 1 minute and 40 seconds. If players want to 100% the game, they'll need to spend 14 straight hours constantly picking up health items and fighting off hordes of flesh-eating zombies. It gets better though, because Infinity mode also has no save functionality, meaning the whole thing has to be done in one sitting. If you're planning on undertaking this ridiculous challenge, you're going to want to keep some snacks handy, because you're going to need them. Number 9, Alien Isolation. Those of you out there who are fans of stealth horror and sci-fi will have probably played 2014's Alien Isolation, and can no doubt attest to what a nail-biting experience it is. It turns out, though, that if you're a completionist, the game has more nightmares in store than you might have realised, and getting that coveted 100% can be a real pain in the neck. In order to get their hands on the one-shot trophy, players need to complete the entirety of Alien Isolation without dying once. Anyone who has played the game will know how hard that would be, as not only do you have the ever-stalking Xenomorph to contend with, but also a ton of other threats as well. You'll basically need to commit the entire game and its mechanics to memory if you've any hope of succeeding. Of course, it is possible to do, with around 10% of players having managed the feat, and if you're quick to reload checkpoints just before you die, you can cheese the achievement. With that said though, it's worth bearing in mind how tense of a game Alien Isolation is to start with, and trying to get to the one-shot trophy is enough to send anyone's blood pressure through the roof. Number 8, Crypt of the Necrodancer. Those of you who are into your roguelikes will know that completing a flawless run is pretty much the aim of the game. It's generally not an easy task by any means, but it is very satisfying when you're finally able to complete the game. 2015's Crypt of the Necrodancer puts an interesting spin on the genre, allowing players to move and attack only if they do so in time to the game's music. It's a neat mechanic and it makes for some interesting gameplay. That is, of course, until you try to 100% the game, as one of its trickiest achievements tasks players with completing a run with Coda, one of the most useless characters known to mankind. In order to even unlock Coda, players need to first complete 9 runs with each of the base game's characters, 9 in total, which is a huge undertaking in and of itself. Once that's done, they simply need to do it one more time with Coda, who moves at twice the speed of other characters and dies if it misses a beat or picks up gold. Thanks to this achievement, attaining 100% completion is devilishly tricky, and is so hard in fact, that even the game's creator hasn't been able to do it. Number 7, Rock Band 2. If you grew up in the 2000s and had aspirations of one day becoming a rock star like those lovely boys and girls in your favourite bands, then you probably owned one of the Rock Band games, along with all of their parent annoying peripherals. There were some songs featured in the games that were difficult to complete in themselves, and many players spent hours trying to get perfect scores on tracks like Judas Priest's Painkillers and Dream Theater's Panic Attack. If you had any hopes of completing the game in its entirety though, you'd have to get through far more than just the one song. Players looking to obtain the aptly named Bladder of Steel achievement would need to complete the Endless Setlist too. The setlist clocked in at around 5 hours, which in gaming terms is a rookie number, but when you take into account the fact that gamers had to complete the entire thing without failing once, and without being able to pause the game, it turns into quite the feat. Not only did players have to contend with increasingly tricky songs whilst fighting off fatigue, but they'd also have to carefully time snack and bathroom breaks in the short gaps between tracks. James, get out of the loo! I only have 10 seconds to pee! Number 6. Devil Daggers. Now, if I were to tell you that in order to reach 100% completion in Devil Daggers, you need to survive for just 500 seconds, or just over 8 minutes, you'd probably laugh in my stupid face. After all, 8 minutes is nothing, right? You could barely scoff down a sandwich in that time. So surviving that long in a video game should be absolute doddle, right? If you do think that, then clearly you've never actually played Devil Daggers, because let me tell you, it's no easy feat. Released in 2016, Devil Daggers plops players down into an arena and tasks them with simply surviving for as long as they can. The player can shoot daggers from their fingers and must move about in order to avoid the increasing number of enemies, which will kill them if they get too close. Naturally, things start out slow, but the number of enemies can very quickly overwhelm the player, and most will find that they die long before the timer hits 500 seconds. It's little wonder that only 0.2% of players have managed to attain the Devil Dagger achievement, and to those who have done it, we hope you treated yourself to a nice holiday afterwards. Your stress levels must be off the charts. Number 5. Crusader Kings 2. Here's a question for you. How does one complete a game that has no set objectives? The answer, if you're playing Crusader Kings 2 at least, is with great difficulty. Set in the Middle Ages and released in 2012, the grand strategy game sees players ruling over their very own medieval dynasty. Really, the only goal is to attain as many prestige and piety points as possible in order to surpass other European dynasties in the whose dynasty is the best rankings. With that said, just because the game doesn't have explicit goals, it doesn't mean there aren't achievements. Though, considering that only 15% of players have been able to unlock even the most attainable one, which requires them to simply marry another character, things don't bode well for anyone looking to complete the game. If you are hell-bent on 100% completing Crusader Kings 2, then there are over 130 different achievements you'll need to attain, including having the Pope trampled by elephants, converting a priest to Satanism then having them become Pope, and eating a character of the Bon religion. Many of the achievements do have fun names, like Papal Mache and Bon Appetit though, so at least you'll get the occasional giggle as you slowly lose your mind trying to obtain them all. Number 4. Super Meat Boy. Those of you who've played Super Meat Boy will know that it's a punishing game. The platformer, released in 2010, follows the exploits of a little red cube called Meat Boy as he attempts to rescue his girlfriend from Dr. Fetus. Delightful. The reason the game is so challenging is the completion of each individual level requires pinpoint precision and split-second timing, and making even the slightest mistake can result in failure. Unsurprisingly, not many people make it to the end of the game, and even fewer manage to 100% complete it. Super Meat Boy does not require players to make a flawless run of the whole game, and instead gives them achievements each time they're able to complete a level without dying. This may sound straightforward enough, and granted you can just work through the levels one at a time, but it's worth remembering that A, there are over 300 levels that need to be completed with no deaths, and 2, some of the said levels are so controller-thrownly tricky that only the most dedicated of players have been able to complete them sans death. If you're wondering, the internet reckons that only between 1 to 3% of players have been able to complete the game. Number 3. Mortal Kombat. Do you like Mortal Kombat? If so, do you think you've got what it takes to finish 2011's Mortal Kombat in its entirety? Well, I wouldn't be so sure if I were you. If you do feel like taking on the challenge, then you're going to need to put in a lot of work, as there are several achievements in Mortal Kombat that take the absolute Michael. Yeah! Firstly, there's the "What does this button do" achievement, which requires players to make it through all of the arcade mode without blocking. It is absolutely doable, but a complete pain in the butt. especially if you play like a writer and mash buttons with reckless abandon. That has nothing on the My Kung Fu is Stronger trophy though, which is attained by gaining mastery on all 28 fighters. In order to achieve mastery in just one character, players need to win 100 matches, perform 100 fatalities and 150 X-ray attacks, spill 10,000 pints of blood, and play with a character for 24 hours. This means that in order to snag the achievement, players need to put in at least 672 hours of playtime, which equates to a solid month's worth of work. RIP your thumbs. Number 2, SingStar. If you're a fan of karaoke, like we here at Team Triple Jump are, it is likely that you owned a copy of SingStar back when it was kicking about in the mid to late 2000s. If you're unfamiliar, SingStar was a series of music games for the PlayStation 2 and 3, and saw players attempting to imitate their favourite vocalists, often with mixed results. The games came with microphone peripherals that were able to determine whether or not the players had hit the right notes. Most people who had the game probably rolled it out for parties, and likely didn't take it all too seriously. If you were a completionist though, you'd have needed to put in some serious time with SingStar, and have a friend that was equally invested in it. In order to get your hands on the musical marathon trophy, players needed to complete a whopping 400 tracks, assuming an average song length of 3 minutes, and let's face it, many songs are probably a lot longer. That means players would need to undertake 20 hours of singing. As though that weren't enough, they'd also need to sing with a POW 300 times to get the BFF trophy. Hope you've got some Strepsils at the ready, your poor throat's going to be a complete mess. And number 1, The Stanley Parable. The Stanley Parable is a funny little game. It tells the story of a man named Stanley whose job is to monitor data on a computer screen and press buttons when prompted. One day, however, the monitor goes blank, and, not knowing what to do, Stanley decides to wander the building, guided by the narrator, in the hopes of finding answers. Players can choose to comply with what the narrator says, or do as they please, resulting in the narrator getting increasingly frustrated.
I still don't think we're communicating properly.
And there are loads of different endings available depending on what the player chooses to do throughout the game's runtime. Getting all of the endings doesn't mean you completed the game though, as there are 2 achievements that can only be earned by not playing the game. The Go Outside achievement can only be obtained by not playing the game for 5 years, and if you happened to boot up the game within that time frame, the clock would reset. The Super Go Outside achievement was basically the same, only players can only earn it by not playing the game for an entire decade. Of course, you could cheat by simply changing the clock on your computer, but that isn't really in the spirit of completion, is it? Oh well, only 3,653 days to wait, I guess.